Nestled off the southeastern tip of Long Island, New York, Rock Lighthouse stands as a stoic sentinel over one of the most perilous stretches of water in the Atlantic. Rock itself is a narrow chain of submerged rocks that has long been notorious for shipwrecks, the relentless churn of tides, and the unyielding roar of the sea. Mariners for centuries whispered tales of ships disappearing without a trace, dragged under by unseen currents, and sailors lost to the depths. By the mid-19th century, the US Lighthouse Board realized that a fixed beacon was essential to prevent the continuous slaughter of ships. The waters surrounding Fisher's Island Sound were treacherous, particularly during storms, and a lighthouse on Rock became a desperate necessity. Construction began in 1871, an engineering feat of its time. Crews battled harsh winds, high seas, and the constant threat of drowning. Workers anchored themselves to the jagged rocks while hoisting massive blocks of granite, piece by piece, into place. Even the most seasoned engineers admitted that the project seemed cursed. As men vanished, tools were swept away, and the relentless sea claimed its due. Locals often claimed that the rocks themselves were alive, shifting and groaning beneath the waves, as though they resented human interference. By 1878, after 7 grueling years, Rock Lighthouse stood proudly, a cylindrical granite tower rising from the treacherous waves, its light designed to pierce the fog and darkness, warning sailors of the doom that awaited them. Life at Rock Lighthouse was not for the faint-hearted. Isolated miles from the shore, the lighthouse was only accessible by boat, often tossed violently by unpredictable currents. The first keeper, James Holloway, arrived with a mixture of pride and apprehension. He was a man of routine and discipline, yet even his well-ordered life would soon be tested by the lighthouse's sinister reputation. Holloway quickly discovered that the tower had a peculiar personality. At night, the waves seemed to whisper his name. Foghorns bellowed in the distance, but sometimes, when all machinery was silent, a voice, a woman's voice, soft and urgent, echoed faintly through the walls. Fellow lighthouse keepers dismissed these as hallucinations born of isolation, yet Holloway swore he heard the voice calling for help, pleading to escape the watery grave of Rock. Tragedy struck in 1883. During a storm of unmatched fury, a supply boat was dashed against the rocks. Holloway, his lantern clutched tightly, tried to save the sailors, but the sea claimed them all. In the aftermath, Holloway would often wander the lighthouse at night, murmuring their names, seeing shadowy figures pacing the gallery, and sometimes glimpsing forms in the water that vanished when approached. It was said that Rock Lighthouse attracted more than storms and shipwrecks. It attracted spirits. Tales of ghostly presences began almost immediately after the lighthouse was completed. Locals whispered of spectral sailors walking the tower's gallery, their clothes dripping with seawater, faces pale and lifeless, staring out toward the horizon. Some nights, the beam of the lighthouse would catch a shadow that didn't belong, tall, gaunt, and unblinking, standing silently as if keeping vigil over the rocks. The most unsettling stories came from Keeper Holloway's successor, Thomas Wainwright. One particularly fog-laden night, Wainwright heard the creak of the spiral staircase before he had climbed it himself. By the time he reached the lantern room, a figure was already there, a woman, her hair tangled and wet as though she had just emerged from the ocean. She pointed insistently toward the horizon, lips moving in a silent warning. Moments later, a ship, its lights barely visible through the fog, struck the rocks and splintered. Wainwright, shaken to the core, later wrote in his journal, "I have no doubt that she was not a figment of my imagination. She was the sea's own emissary, a warning from the drowned." Over the years, other keepers corroborated similar phenomena. There were reports of cold spots so intense that breath would fog the air in the lighthouse's lantern room, unexplained footsteps echoing through empty galleries and objects shifting locations despite being secured. One keeper even claimed he found a small, soaked journal in the corner of his room, containing entries written by a sailor who had perished decades earlier, though no explanation could be found for its sudden appearance. Visitors, though rare, spoke of a creeping sense of unease as they approached the lighthouse by boat. Cameras would fail mysteriously, compasses spun without reason, and sudden fog seemed to cling to the lighthouse in defiance of the wind. Some believed these were manifestations of grief, a psychic residue left by the countless men and women lost to the rocks and waves over the centuries. The lighthouse itself seemed to absorb their pain, their warnings, and their regrets, replaying them for anyone daring enough to witness them. A particularly chilling account from 1911 involved keeper Edward Carmichael's assistant, young Samuel Briggs. One stormy night, while tending the light, Briggs claimed he saw ghostly hands reaching out from the waves, grasping at the tower as if trying to climb to safety. The forms vanished when approached, leaving only the memory of cold, clammy fingers brushing against his coat. Carmichael, long accustomed to the lighthouse's strange ways, simply recorded in the log, "The dead are restless tonight. We must watch and listen and remember. Even today, the ghosts of Race Rock remain." Locals insist that on certain nights, when the fog rolls thick over the rocks, the faint glow of lanterns can be seen along the gallery, moving as if tended by invisible hands. Some claim to hear sailors calling for help, keepers muttering warnings, or the soft sobs of a woman lost to the depths. The lighthouse, while a beacon of safety for the living, has long been a gathering place for those the sea would not release. Technological progress did little to soothe the lighthouse's uncanny reputation. By the early 20th century, Race Rock Lighthouse had transitioned to kerosene lamps and later electricity, improving its practical functionality. Yet keepers found that even modern machinery could not escape the tower's mysterious influence. Lights would flicker at the worst possible moments, often during storms or thick fog, as though the lighthouse itself were testing the resolve of its keeper. On numerous occasions, Wainwright and later keepers reported that the Fresnel lens rotated erratically without power, creating strange patterns on the water, sometimes illuminating phantom ships that were not there. Maintenance crews would inspect the lamps, circuits, and gears, only to find everything in perfect working order. The most notorious phenomenon was the appearance of strange, coloured lights offshore. In 1925, keeper Edward Carmichael recorded witnessing a glowing green light bobbing in the water, moving against the current, almost as if guiding unseen ships towards safety or danger. On several occasions, these lights coincided with maritime disasters. Vessels would strike the rocks despite having supposedly clear passage. Many theorized that these were not mere optical illusions, but spectral guides, souls attempting to correct the mistakes that led to their own demise. Mechanical malfunctions were equally disturbing. Doors would swing open despite being latched. Telegraph lines would send garbled messages, often containing fragments of phrases like "save us" or "turn back." On one occasion, a storm damaged the lighthouse's external ladder, and yet witnesses claimed to see a shadowy figure climbing it in the dead of night, leaving no footprints or wet marks. Even the keepers themselves were affected psychologically. Long-term residents of Race Rock Lighthouse reported hallucinations, sudden headaches, and feelings of being watched. One electrician in the 1930s noted, "It is as if the tower has a memory. It remembers the waves that took men, the screams, the desperation. It wants us to remember too." In 1932, a visiting historian documented a particularly eerie event. While observing the lighthouse from a boat, he saw multiple lights on the gallery, lights that could not belong to the lighthouse's lamp or its reflection. They blinked rhythmically, almost communicating, then vanished one by one as if sinking into the water. Following this, the historian recounted hearing faint voices, the soft sound of dripping water, and the creak of unseen footsteps along the spiral staircase. He later theorized that these lights were manifestations of souls trapped in the tower, forever tethered to the machinery that both sustained them and reminded them of their deaths. Through decades, these incidents solidified Rock Lighthouse's reputation as not only a technical marvel, but a paranormal hotspot. The tower had a personality all its own, one that could manipulate machinery, bend perception, and signal warnings both physical and spectral. Those who spent time within its walls knew that it was not just stone and steel. It was a vessel for grief, memory, and perhaps even vengeance. Life at Rock Lighthouse was perilous, even without the spectres that haunted its walls. The isolation itself was a slow, grinding torment. Miles from shore, surrounded by jagged rocks and merciless waves, keepers faced nature's fury with little hope of rescue. Storms could cut them off for days, leaving them with dwindling supplies, howling winds, and relentless pounding surf. In 1938, during the infamous New England hurricane, keeper Samuel Green experienced the lighthouse at its most unforgiving. The winds screamed like a chorus of the damned, tearing at the tower's structure and sending waves higher than the gallery itself. Green fought to maintain the light, knowing that every flicker of darkness could spell disaster for ships navigating the perilous channel. As he climbed the spiral staircase to ensure the lamp remained lit, he felt the vibrations through the granite tower, not merely from the storm, but as if the lighthouse itself shivered in fear or anger. After the storm, Green discovered the grim aftermath. Debris from wrecked vessels clinging to the tower's base, and bodies of sailors who had been lost to the rocks, tossed into impossible positions by the waves. Some appeared to be reaching out for help, others huddled as if trying to shield themselves from some unseen force. Green's journal recounts his horror. "I have never seen such misery. The dead lie among the rocks, yet their eyes seem to follow me. The lighthouse itself whispers that we are not alone here." Isolation did more than test the body. It tested the mind. Keepers often described the oppressive weight of solitude, an omnipresent feeling that unseen eyes watched their every move. Objects would move inexplicably, lanterns would extinguish themselves, and the sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, echoed in rooms no one occupied. One keeper reported waking to the sound of a chair scraping across the floor, only to find it exactly where it had been the night before. Yet the room felt heavier, colder, and somehow sadder. Isolation also amplified encounters with the dead. Green and others before him claimed to see ghostly figures standing just beyond the gallery railing, silhouetted against lightning flashes, faces pale and lifeless. Sometimes these figures would appear in the water below, floating without sinking, their arms outstretched as if pleading for salvation. Green wrote, "They are not hostile, only lost. And in their loss, they tether themselves to this lighthouse, binding it to their sorrow." Even after automation reduced human presence, stories of isolation persisted. Passing sailors often recounted feeling watched as they navigated the channel, or seeing a figure pacing the gallery at night. Some swore they saw shadowy forms climbing the tower's stairs, vanishing as their boats drew closer. Rock Lighthouse, it seemed, did not forgive absence or neglect. It demanded attention, respect, and remembrance. Despite automation in the mid-20th century, the stories surrounding Rock Lighthouse did not fade. In fact, they seemed to intensify, as if the spirits of the drowned and the keepers bound to the tower had grown more restless without regular human presence. Modern visitors, scientists, engineers, and occasional thrill-seekers reported strange phenomena. On foggy nights, some claimed that the lighthouse emitted two beams of light, one bright, steady, and mechanical, the other dimmer, pulsating with an eerie rhythm, seemingly guiding invisible ships. Boats navigating near the rocks sometimes reported hearing faint voices echoing across the water. Sometimes a sailor calling for help, sometimes a keeper warning, turn back or perish. A particularly chilling account came in 1974, when a research team studying tidal currents anchored near the lighthouse. As twilight fell, they claimed to see shadows moving along the gallery, tall figures, some bending as if in pain, others standing rigidly and silent. One researcher swore that the figures were accompanied by faint whispers in old maritime dialects, voices blending fear, warning, and sorrow. No explanation was found, and their electronic equipment behaved erratically, recording bursts of static and unidentifiable signals. Legends grew around the idea that Rock Lighthouse served as a kind of crossroads between the living and the dead. The rocks beneath it were littered with wreckage, and the sea seemed unwilling to release its victims. On some nights, when the fog was thickest, locals claimed that the cries of the drowned could be heard through the mist, carrying tales of ships lost, men betrayed by tides, and women who had watched helplessly from the deck. Even beyond these auditory and visual phenomena, the lighthouse's influence seemed to extend into the physical world. Some maintain that tides rise higher than usual near the lighthouse without warning. Boats report strange navigational anomalies, compasses spinning, or instruments failing when near the structure. Many theorists suggest that the lighthouse's tragic history and the countless deaths around it have left a psychic imprint, an energy that bends the natural laws, manifesting both as warnings and as reminders of the sea's unyielding power. In recent years, paranormal investigators have taken particular interest in these modern legends. Teams using infrared cameras and motion detectors have documented shadowy figures climbing the spiral staircase or lingering near the lantern room. Electronic voice phenomena, EVP, recordings capture faint cries, fragmented words, and sometimes phrases that eerily match entries from the keeper's old journals. These modern accounts serve to reinforce the lighthouse's reputation. Though automated, Rock remains alive in a way few structures can claim, a sentinel not only of maritime safety, but of lingering souls. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, Rock Lighthouse attracted a new type of visitor: paranormal investigators, amateur ghost hunters, and curious historians seeking evidence of the stories long whispered by mariners and keepers. What once had been a place of human toil and tragedy now became a laboratory of the unexplained, a site where history and the supernatural seemed to converge in tangible ways. The first formal investigations began in the late 1970s, when a team of researchers from the New England Paranormal Society visited the lighthouse to document its eerie reputation. They arrived by boat, their equipment clanging against the rails, the lighthouse looming like a silent monolith above the churning waves. Inside, they found the familiar chill that keepers had described for decades. Thermometers dropped inexplicably, and the air carried a damp, metallic scent, as if tinged by salt water and decay. The investigators quickly noticed the strange interplay of light and shadow. Flashlights flickered for no reason, and the Fresnel lens rotated sporadically, despite having been locked for maintenance. One team member, a sensitive with claimed psychic ability, reported seeing the outlines of men and women pacing the gallery. "They're not trying to scare us," she whispered, eyes wide. "They're waiting, watching. They need to be acknowledged." Using electronic voice phenomenon, EVP recorders, the team captured more than just the creak of the lighthouse's spiral stairs. Faint, fragmented voices emerged from the static. "Turn, back, water, help, don't, sink, we trapped, forever." The researchers played back the recordings repeatedly, noting the uncanny alignment of the voices with historical accounts of ships lost on Rock. Some voices were recognizably female, others male, yet all carried the unmistakable tone of fear and urgency. Motion sensors revealed ghostly movements along the spiral staircase and the gallery. On infrared footage, shadowy figures appeared to climb the stairs without feet touching the steps, glide along the upper platform, and vanish when approached. The most chilling event occurred when a camera positioned near the lantern room caught a fleeting apparition of a woman, her hair streaming like seaweed, pointing toward the horizon, the very image reported by keepers over a century earlier. Investigators began to suspect that Rock Lighthouse functioned as more than a haunted structure. It appeared to act as a psychic beacon, drawing souls bound to the violent waters surrounding it and preserving their memories. Some researchers theorized that the lighthouse's physical isolation and the constant rhythm of its lamp created an energy field, amplifying the lingering anguish of those lost at sea. Perhaps most unnerving were the accounts from those who spent multiple nights in the lighthouse. They reported waking to the sensation of being watched, the faint pressure of invisible hands on their shoulders, and whispers in languages that had not been spoken for centuries. One night, a researcher claimed that the tower seemed to pulse underfoot, synchronized with the rhythmic crashing of distant waves, as if the lighthouse itself was alive and aware of their presence. Even from the water, Rock continued to assert its spectral influence. Boaters reported lights appearing offshore, green and blue, leading phantom ships around the rocks. Some claimed these lights were visible only briefly, vanishing before they could be photographed, while others described hearing faint cries as the waves collided violently against hidden shoals. Despite decades of automation, technological advances, and safety protocols, the investigations concluded that Rock Lighthouse resisted full understanding. It was not merely haunted by residual energy or superstition. It was a living record of tragedy, isolation, and lingering spirits. The dead of Rock did not rest quietly. They observed, they guided, they warned. And occasionally, they made themselves seen and heard by those willing to confront the dark history of this treacherous stretch of water. For paranormal investigators, historians, and daring visitors, Rock Lighthouse remains an enigma, a place where the line between history and haunting blurs, and where the presence of the past is as tangible as the cold, unforgiving granite beneath their feet. Today, Rock Lighthouse is an emblem of maritime history and spectral mystery. While its practical role has diminished thanks to modern navigation technology, its stories endure, whispered in the annals of the lighthouse history and the tales of sailors who brave the waters. The lighthouse stands not only as a monument to human ingenuity and perseverance, but also as a reminder of the ocean's merciless nature. Each gust of wind through the tower, each crashing wave against its granite walls, carries the echoes of those who perished, and perhaps those who continue to wander between the worlds of the living and the dead. Visitors and historians alike acknowledge that Rock Lighthouse is a place where history and the supernatural entwine. It is a beacon for sailors, a sentinel for the lost, and a haunting reminder of the thin veil that separates life from death. On foggy nights, local fishermen swear that the lighthouse emits a second faint light, green and pulsating, guiding some unseen vessel safely past the rocks. Others claim that when the fog lifts, you can hear cries from the past. Sailors pleading for a lighthouse that could have saved them, keepers calling for assistance, and the endless sound of the waves themselves, relentless and knowing. Rock Lighthouse is not merely a structure of stone and light. It is a repository of memory, tragedy, and lingering spirits. It reminds all who dare to approach it that the sea never forgets, and that those lost to its depths may never truly leave. In the end, Rock Lighthouse remains, casting its beam across the Atlantic, warning, protecting, and haunting, the silent guardian of a watery graveyard, where history, legend, and the paranormal converge.